And we see a rise of market shares of many green products from China nowadays compared to, let's say, 5 years ago. But that is more or less driven by market forces, because we are not forced to buy Chinese products, but we choose to buy Chinese products. So in that sense, we are buying green products from China. The US is using tariffs as a measure to reduce Chinese import, and they have a sort of general idea and general perspective that that protection is needed. So they are doing it unilateral with all kinds of products, with all kinds of tariffs. If you look at the EU is slightly different in this perspective. They are using measures case to case. They are much more involved in trade with China, bilateral trade with China, and that means that they are hesitating to use this very aggressive general system of all kinds of products and all kinds of tariffs. So they are eager to have a good relationship with China. It is quite interesting that if you look at questionnaires on are you a believer for globalization, are you a believer of international free trade, in the 1990s, the believers of free trade were Western countries. The believers of free trade, you could see them in the US, and you saw that at that time, emerging markets, hesitations about free trade. Now, if you look at questionnaires today about free trade and globalization, the believers of globalization are found in emerging markets, while the Western countries indicate very clearly that they also see problems related to globalization. So what is happening today in the US is really the situation that the US image of being a believer in free trade is clearly under attack. And the same can be seen in some European countries. And again, the believers of free trade can be found in other parts of the world. And that is for globalization a big issue. Because for globalization with open markets, you need leadership in terms of believing that international trade is good. And nowadays in the US, we don't see a lot of free trade believers. The term overcapacity is widely used, but obviously quite difficult to measure, because what is overcapacity? In economic thinking, overcapacity is measured by what is the normal capacity of, for example, a plant, or if you sum up all the plants for the country. So what is the capacity, how much they are able to produce? Machines cannot work for 100% because they need maintenance. They are not working every minute of the day. So if you look at overcapacity, it is not precisely how much you are able to produce, but how much you are producing under normal circumstances. So sometimes you see a figure of overcapacity which is relatively high, because then the calculation is made on what is the 100% capacity of a machine. But in economic thinking, that is overemphasizing overcapacity. And that is then substantial lower. Now, the result, whether it is extremely high or low, but the result is that indeed it may increase export. And therefore it may increase market share of Chinese companies abroad. And we see a rise of market shares of many green products from China nowadays compared to, let's say, 5 years ago. But that is more or less driven by market forces, because we are not forced to buy Chinese products, but we choose to buy Chinese products. So in that sense, we are buying green products from China. The level of overcapacity or the market share in itself is maybe not the main issue what we have today in the bilateral relations. What we see today is an extremely strong growth of market shares from Chinese green products. So the level of a market share, I think, is not an issue, but we see the growth of it. And in particular, how to assess this Chinese strategy of investing in manufacturing. So for example, the Chinese narrative on why investments in manufacturing is needed despite maybe some overcapacity, whether that is high or low, but despite the overcapacity, is the fact that in the green transition to come, we need to have enough green products, not only for the short term, but also for the longer term. So we need to invest in these green products today for the longer term transition. Now, that longer term vision, viewpoint, clearly is not visible in the West, because in the West we see the short term impact of it. We see the short term impact that we see the inflow rising from green products from China, and that gives discomfort. So we are emphasizing, the West, they are emphasizing more or less the short-term impact of green products from China, while the Chinese narrative is we have to invest for the longer-term transition.